Hello and welcome to Interfaith Connections. I am your host, Jackie Fuller. Today I bring to you a wonderful woman that you must have on your list of folks to know. Her name is Phyllis J. Outlaw. She is an attorney, she is a reverend, she is a teacher, healer, workshop facilitator, and many more. And I am honored to have her on the program today to discuss domestic violence awareness, particularly also in faith communities. Thank you, Ms. Outlaw, for coming on the program today.
Thank you, Ms. Fuller, for having me. I appreciate this opportunity.
Oh, absolutely, you're welcome. Now, can you share with our audience what inspired you to take on such a big initiative as working in the development and awareness and creation around domestic violence, and why is that important to you to do?
Well, in undergraduate school, most of the time I would do studies papers on relationships and family. And I always wanted to understand the dysfunction of family. Many times when we come from Black communities, we're taught to go to church and church resolves it all. So I always say white folk go to psychologists and Black folk go to church. But my belief is that on Sunday mornings, though the pastor could inspire you to want to change your life and to help you to go into a different direction, many times if there are psychological tools or blocks within you that keep you from being able to master that on your own, unless you have this connection with God that allows you to claim it and make it happen automatically, you need tools to do that. So I suggest that folk go to counseling. Go to counseling, they can get to the root and heal from those parts of them that have not served them, that don't work for them. And a lot of that many times is abuse. With us having come from backgrounds where the Black man especially was a slave and was beaten, we came up learning to reprimand our children through whipping. And though I truly believe that sometimes there's a need for that, hello, we'll reach this point in our society where they want you to do timeouts and all of that. But even if you have a child, do a timeout. If that child is still put back into a situation where they're exposed to dysfunction, then guess what? They're still going to act out in that way. What are you thinking about that, Ms. Fuller?
Well, I think you made valid points, because that's on my list for next month, actually, to read a book in dealing with how the effects of slavery is still affecting our people generations later. So that's something I'm very interested in. I am glad that you mentioned the importance of seeking counseling, because in our community, in many faith communities, but particularly it pops up a lot in our faith communities and our traditions, just because of legacies here dealing with slavery and even afterwards about it. We don't go to counseling. We don't do that. That makes you look crazy. That's seen as something that's taboo. It's not only seen in Christian traditions, but it comes across in some of the other traditions. And I spoke with individuals in the Muslim community about it as well. So that's one of the big things that really need to be put out there, the connection of how important it is to seek counseling, and particularly to maybe some, and just being realistic, some people may prefer to seek someone that looks like them. So they may see somebody like you and say, you could be, that person I can be, seeking out for that type of help. So how do you deal with those issues when there's that taboo or resistance to seeking counseling for healing?
Well, you probably noticed on television now, and a lot of the reality shows and a lot of the other shows, they're showing where folk now are embracing counseling. And even though we're talking about domestic violence, we can either talk about the symptom of the problem or the resolution of the problem. And I was looking at Tamar Braxton, who decided to try to do some healing on TV through dream work. And her boyfriend is a Nigerian Christian, and he believed that this dream work was voodoo and witchcraft. And their relationship was experiencing at that time a breakdown, because he saw the help she was getting was not something, and she said to him, everything you don't understand is not voodoo.
Right.
So many times, if we don't understand it, we think it's got to be something from the devil. Okay. And so I think in the pulpit, a lot of ministers have to now also open up their mind to counseling, because I've done studies where a small percentage of churches actually have counseling departments in their church. So if a couple are sitting together on Sunday morning praising God, and then when they get back home, the husband smacks the wife, or the wife hits him with a frying pan over the head,
Right.
where does God go? Okay.
Right.
And so the pastor may have been talking about Exodus and when the children fled from Egypt, but what about the abuse that's going on in the household, and how do you translate that into that? Even when David had so many wives and killed this husband so that he could have Bathsheba, I mean, and then he lost his son. I mean, all of this are stories that they could incorporate into their sermons on Sunday mornings or Wednesday evenings at Bible study, so that people connect the past with what's current, and then focus on how do you resolve that and heal that, and then erase the voodoo between the Bible and psychology, so that a real healing can take place.
Because that would be a first step for anyone to actually admit that something's happening in their household. And with you also having that intersection of being a lawyer or attorney, how can one do that and still make sure like they're safe, or they can seek legal help in regards to getting out of their situation? So you have that component where they know they want to do counseling, but they may feel like it could be some type of act of violence, or how, should they get a protection order? Have any of those situations like ever come up? How do you deal with working with people who are in a counseling situation or want to go to counseling, but they are concerned about some form of retaliation from?
Well, I've been blessed to have two businesses that I work with. One is my nonprofit, CLR Community Empowerment. And if you go to our website, we have a section on domestic violence. And we have a list of resources there that you can select if you need help. And if you call the office, we do an intake to find out what you've been experiencing. And many times we have women who've had to flee their homes, and sometimes men. People think of domestic violence as only being with women, but there's a large percentage of men who are also being abused. And the studies say that the women tend to use the guns and the men use their hands. So we direct them to resources like the House of Roof, where they can go stay if they need a place to stay. There are also programs that will give the victim monies to relocate. As a lawyer, they may have to go in, as you said, go into court and get a domestic violence protective order. So my law firm, actually for profit, will represent couples. Many times I've represented the men who have been accused of domestic violence, and the courts will issue a 1-year stay away order. But he has to stay away from the woman, or the woman has to stay away from the man. It's interesting because many times the women get the stay away order, but then they want to make contact with the man. Okay. Yeah. And that puts him in jeopardy, and kind of knocks out the idea that she's afraid of him. But because domestic violence can be a very codependent type of cyclical way of behavior, the woman who attracts a man who's violent, or the man who attracts a woman who's violent, on some level, they are recreating from their childhood a pattern. So even though they may have a judge to say, stay away, there's a need for that to happen again. So the woman who may make a telephone call or stop by his house, and then all of a sudden the violence breaks out again, but she's perpetuating the cycle because she doesn't know what it means to be home alone and not a part of that kind of vicious cycle.
That was about the codependent. But one thing I am curious to know, with your practice, how do you work, or how do you take those steps to help that individual break that codependency and foster the healing necessary, that they necessarily need to be able to move forward, to be able to, like you use in your title for your nonprofit, that empowerment piece. How do you take them through that healing process so they're not going back to what's familiar and empowering themselves to be in healthier relationships?
Well, I'm a lawyer and I'm a minister and I'm a life coach. So, a lot of times that people think you're wearing a lot of different hats, but it's all the same thing. And I have been in court on cases where they're in the court fighting about visitation, but at the same time, the mother of the child is afraid of the wife of the husband who then had a child with the girlfriend. And we have to bring those two families together so that the children, most of all, come up in a healthy environment. So many times I've had to sit down and counsel the child sometimes, many times take the child into my office away from the parents because the parents get caught up in their own need to hurt each other and they lose sight of the child. And we also recommend the child to go to counseling. And so any work that I feel is beyond my expertise, then we have a list of doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, programs that parents can take their children to or that they can go to. Sometimes a person having psychological issues needs medication. So you just need to be aware of that and be prepared to refer them out.
Wow, that's deep. So
Yes,
so within, like, since you're an activist in this work, this is kind of the way you do it as well. How do you present your work with maybe leadership or clergy at various churches? Have you been getting any positive feedback or interest? Have there been resistance into doing this type of work or bringing it to churches to facilitate awareness building, and what should clergy look out for in their congregation for signs of domestic violence?
Well, that's a good question, Ms. Fuller, because I have done workshops in churches to help explore these type of issues, exercises with the congregation and on a Saturday workshop. And many times healing will take place immediately or an emotion will come up through the work that we do. And even though they're very responsive to it, then after the workshop, the pastor will be a little afraid of it. They'll come back to me and say, I didn't know it was going to involve all of that. I may need to read up on what you do in the next time before I permit that to happen. Some of the members say, was that voodoo? Was that witchcraft? What was that? Because they're not familiar with that kind of work. Now, it's interesting. If you go, and I hope it's okay, but if you go into a white environment, you get a total different response.
Oh, yeah.
They're much more apt to be receptive and be able to connect with what you're sharing with them and the growth that's going on. So it's a much more open opportunity.
Right.
Now, the churches that I've gone to that already have counseling departments, many times churches are very protective of their congregation.
Yes.
So they don't want someone who's not a member or who they have a connection with to come in and do that kind of work with their members. So it's very difficult to break into the church environment to do this kind of work. And as I said, once you do, because I've done it in a few churches, then afterwards it's scary for them. So, and I'm also thinking, though no one has ever said it to me, it may be that they don't want to be have a liability exposure either.
Right.
And so unless the churches that have some kind of insurance, I guess because you're doing psychological work, even though it's in the name of Jesus or Buddha or whoever it is you pray to, okay? Still, if that person breaks down or cries or finds themselves devastated because of what they've experienced, because a workshop is 2 hours or 4 hours or a day, it's not an ongoing thing. I did a workshop in El Paso at a church, and the director of the counseling department said he was going to utilize the tools that I did in the workshop with the membership that he had. But see, that means he's functioning. That same church is where the the pastor said, well, maybe we need to read up on what you do the next time. So, because people don't, it's interesting, people can emote in church, they can cry in church, but if that is caused by someone who's opening up that whole psychological piece, it's very scary for people.
Mm-hmm. Well, the word that came to my mind is vulnerability. And I know being being at a Unity church, that word comes up all the time. You gotta be vulnerable, you gotta be vulnerable. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Like, in the beginning, I was like, I don't know y'all to be doing all I was just like, I'm still trying to just understand like some of the metaphysical stuff you got going on here. But I noticed, ironically, there's just a different vibe because I think that work is so encouraged there. And I just feel sometimes like in my observation of other, I would just say from the perspective of Christian traditions, if this type of work, like doing the work that you do, helping people heal from that, it can change like the vibe, not only, or the mindset, and releasing that emotional baggage so people can heal. It can really just change the dynamic, not only for the individual, but how that individual can contribute to society, including the house of worship they attend. So if you have that blockage, and I think you used that term like blockage or something around that, it's like, well, how can you do what God called you to do, or universal, whatever your belief system is? It's like you're blocked. You have so many blocks that you can't really do what God's called you to do. So
a lot of times I tell people, I say, you have to be able to hear what God is saying to you. And if you're blocked, you can't hear and discern where he's guiding you and where he's taking you. And then some people will say, I ain't never heard God. I don't believe God talks to you. I'm like, if you just wait for that little still small voice that's nudging you along the way. But if you're angry, got low self-esteem, jealous, don't feel you're worthy, you just gonna be out there searching and not finding.
It's
but you mentioned Unity. I've been to Unity and I studied the Course in Miracles at Unity. So Unity, when they deal with metaphysical principles, they are definitely tied into psychological principles, principles of empowerment, principles of building your connection with God. In the church, in some churches, they teach that God is outside of us, and so therefore we are powerless. But if we believe that God is within us and through him we can do all things, then we understand we're powerful. And in knowing that, then we can make connections and declare and make things happen. So I think it's a question, and I still think that goes back to enslavement, having a slave mentality, or whether you're going to have an empowerment.
Yeah.
And whether the pastor wants to keep you dependent upon him or her, or whether he wants to see you grow and empower yourself and go out and do what God has called you to do.
Right. Because I think that's the critical work, regardless of anyone's situation, when they're in that kind of transition coming out of something that's traumatic. It's like, for many people, they're still reliving the trauma. Some people are still talking about that abuse situation that happened 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Over and over again.
And then you realize that they haven't healed from it and it's repetitive. I don't know if it's considered a form of like what the PSTD might be, but it's at the same time, it's like there's so many resources out here to help you move forward from that. Is it that they're afraid to get help, or do they prefer to be stuck? Like they get something out of being stuck. And I'm not saying it in a negative way, but it's just like, do you want to heal? Do you want to continue to be in this loop?
Well, CLR puts out Wisdom Wednesday videos that your public relations consultant services helped us to refine, and one of the tools that we're able to reach out into the community. And one of the videos that I put out said, are you comfortable in your misery?
Yes.
And so many times, because all we know is pain and unhappiness and discontentment, that's normal for us. So to step out of that is frightening, and people don't even know they're stuck. So unless they have someone, and then they draw to them other people who are similar, so they all sit around in the same little group and talk about the past instead of what they're going to do in the future.
Because I think that's a core piece of it. People are just used, if you grew up and you saw that all your life, people arguing and fighting, and just seeing all these, it's just inappropriate kind of like actions being done to family members, you think that person will think that's normal, you know, or unless they have friends or other relatives they can visit and they can see a different dynamic. But I think people would think, you know, people in those situations would say this is normal, and you're talking about giving them or helping them create a new normal, which is scary, which is that vulnerability piece. It's what's the valley, like walking or being in the valley, because you don't, what the heck is going on, or what is my life going to be like post this abusive situation, or post dealing with all this trauma, or just, you know, dysfunction that's going on in my environment.
Well, a lot of people don't like reality TV. I like it to see the psychological components of it. And I like for people to see, sometimes they think what's happening to them is only happening to them. And then when you look at reality TV, you see, oh, this is common. Everybody doing that. You know, no matter what color we are, many times we all got the same issue. So we're just acting it out in different ways, but there's always somebody else who's acting it out the way that you are. And I think it's better if the show can show you how to get out of that so you're not stuck in it.
Right. Yeah. I'm very solution oriented. I'm just, you know, if you present a problem, I'm like, okay, how do I get this? How I get over it? What's the solution? What's up? How long will it take? 60 days, 90 days? That's how I think. I don't like sitting in the misery, the hurt. I'm like, get me out. Because especially knowing, you know me for a long time, I'm like, I know I'm called to do work. I can't be in this, you know. And, you know, some people say, well, you just need to relax and chill. But I said, no, I know I need to do this work to move forward. And some people, it's the opposite.
I know some people that every time you talk with them, they talking about their mama. My mama did this, my mama did that. Well, how old were you when your mama did it? I was 10, I was 12. Well, you 40 now, you still talking about your mama. And then when you listen to them, everybody who will listen, no matter if it's the store clerk or the banker, they talk about their mama. So, you know, it's like at some point, you can't get out of that, because, you know, as a spiritual principle is whatever you focus on is recreated in your reality.
Right.
So if that's all you're going to focus on, that's all you're going to see in your life. So, you know, we have to look beyond that. It's interesting because we've been talking about a lot of the psychological piece of abuse that happens. And sometimes we can abuse ourselves with these memories that we keep inflicting the pain upon ourselves. Then we draw someone in to try to have a relationship with them, and subconsciously we start inflicting on them the same pain that was inflicted upon us. And then we project onto them what our parents did to us, or what the little 12-year-old in school who pulled our hair and called us a name. So whatever they say to us, somehow we take it through that filter and we react to it. So if you saw, I tell parents, if no matter what you say to your children, they're going to mirror what you do, not what you say. So, you know, you can't be an alcoholic and tell your child not to drink. You can't be verbally abusive to your child and then tell your child to be peaceful and speak nicely. Okay?
Yes.
Oh, you sound like you connect to that. Why? What did you just connect to?
It's contradicting, you know. It's like, well, which one is it? Are you going to be this way, or are you going to be that way? Which one is it? Because what is it? They teach in a lot of traditions, like you can't have those kind of like vibes or energy in the same place. It's like, well, are you going to be the negative or are you going to be the positive? Which one is it? And like people do.
When I was young like you,
negative.
When I was young like you and dating, I remember thinking when this guy was, something he did I didn't like, and I said, well, when he comes to the car, I'm not going to say anything. And when he came to the car, I started speaking to him just like my mother would have spoken to my stepfather, and it just came out my mouth, and I was like, I wanted to be to grab it and bring it back, but I had learned that behavior. So we learn abusive behavior, and it's unfortunate. And so what I talk about a lot of times is having a bilocation experience. And that's when you're able to stand outside of yourself and see what you're doing, and then control how you react to it. But that takes a certain level of healthiness, baby. You can't be dysfunctional and think you're going to, first of all, you ain't going to be able to stand outside yourself because you're not that much in control of your emotions to have that experience. But it's great when you can see yourself acting a certain way and say, look at what you're doing, you need to stop.
Yeah. So in your work, have you had any cases or clients that were like miraculous, like they did the work, they healed, and you're like, these individuals made you feel like this is definitely what I'm called to do. I am so glad that these individuals are moving forward and contributing to society. Have you ever had clients come to you where you felt like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had clients like that. And I remember one young lady was a teenager in school, and maybe she was 14, 15, very angry, sexual identity crisis, couldn't get along with her mother, just a lot of anger. And her mother told me recently that she's very successful now and is doing her own business. So it's good to hear stories like that. Another young lady who, as I said, was talking about her mother all the time. Now I rarely hear her talk about her mother in her conversations. I talk to folk about setting boundaries because a lot of times, if you have a parent especially, it's hard to set boundaries with your parent. And if they are abusive towards you or hurting you, because you love them, you will let them step inside of your own inner space and hurt you. I tell folks you can love your parents, but you don't have to let them into that peace. You got to set
Right.
So yeah, I've seen people now who have better boundaries. I had another young lady who lost her son, and she was just miserable and grieving and just couldn't get beyond it. And now she's in a healthy relationship, and there used to be times where she would go out to the cemetery in the dark and sit out there. And now she hardly gets to the cemetery because she's got her life full of love and peace, and she doesn't have to hang out in the cemetery.
And it's interesting, you mentioned the piece about setting boundaries. I think there's still people who may not say, well, what do you mean by setting boundaries? Or how do you set boundaries with loved ones or people you care about? I can't tell my parent, my parent or my child, or my particularly adult child maybe, you can't say leave me alone, obviously. Well, maybe you can, but how do you people say leave me alone? But for me, I didn't learn about a lot of this stuff until my 20s about setting boundaries, even though I knew here and there in my teens, I did set boundaries, that's what we would call it. But, some of those boundaries that need to be set where I can have peace of mind and know that I'm safe, I'm safe in my home. But many people wouldn't, even if I advise them and say, yeah, you need to set boundaries with your family member or your ex, it's still there like, Jackie, what do you mean by that? And I was just like, wow, it's not being taught in so many places. So how would you explain to someone who has no concept of setting boundaries, or maybe no concept of honoring boundaries?
Oh, I like that one. But that's a very common thing for people to do especially with their family members, and especially with the love in your life, that you just let them step all inside of your space. And even in my own situation, because I work 24/7, and I operate on a lot of deadlines, I have times when I have telephone time, I have work time. And my family knows, don't call me Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, I'm working, okay? They know if I'm on deadline and they call me, first of all, I'll answer the phone, I'm setting a boundary. By not answering the phone, I'm setting a boundary. And then when I call them back, I just had a friend recently say, well, I can't talk now, can you call me back? And I said, no, you're not gonna do that. And they got upset with me. Now I've got to figure out, how we can come to a peaceful place, but because you're not available when I call, it doesn't mean that when you call me, I have to make myself available. If you're calling me at a time where I'm going to be working on the deadline, I can't change that. I choose not to. It's not that I can't, I choose not to. So for people like you and myself who are in our own businesses, we're in survival mode. We can't allow other folks' stuff to trickle into our space and then control what we're doing.
Right.
So you asked to keep saying, I might lose some friends around this situation because, they wanted, or as my friend said when she called me, we want to feel we can call you back. Well, yeah, you can. That doesn't mean you're going to be able to talk to me. It just means you can call me back. So setting boundaries means deciding what's important to you, Now, if that person has an emergency, yeah, I'm going to stop and try to deal with that. But we're not going to get on the phone and talk about whether Biden going to win or whether Trump going to win when I have a 12 p.m. deadline that I got to get done. So, but the thing is, Jackie, when you set these boundaries, you got to not feel guilty.
Oh,
That's the problem. When people set the boundaries, then they feel guilty. Oh, I should have talked to him. Oh, look, oh Lord. You know, I was helping my sister through some issues, and she decided, and I was having my staff to work for her. When I called her, she didn't answer the phone, and she gets into that manner. Well, when I'm trying to help you, and then you don't receive the help, then I stop and I go to another project. I'm setting a boundary. I don't have to keep calling and keep trying to help you when you're not ready to receive what I'm trying to give you. It's setting a boundary.
okay. So let's take boundaries setting into the world of dealing with domestic violence. So if you have someone, significant partner or not, or just someone who's, I don't like the stalking or however you want to explain it, and
They're stalking you?
Even stalking, like say for example, you're setting these boundaries and they're still following you, or you know, abusive situation you need to get out of, or just, you know, any kind of an inappropriate situation where when the person laid out all, you know, the different boundaries you mentioned, and then they have to may get legal assistance to do that.
Oh, you mean that you ask them to leave you alone and they won't?
And they won't. And
well,
then
that's back to the stay away order. Is it violent or is they just pursuing you?
It could be either one. It could be just, you know, it's like, just stop calling me, and they continue to like call and follow.
Well, if you're answering the phone, they're going to continue to call you. Setting a boundary means not answering the phone.
Or not calling, they just keep calling and calling.
And it's not like, answering the phone.
And you feel the need to get the stay away order, restraining order. There are some people who may feel shame with that, and they don't see it's a form of setting boundary. They don't see it's a way of being, you know, a form of empowering themselves to be serious with that individual about setting boundaries. So is there, how do we get, I don't want to use the way where I'm forcing it this way on people, but how can that be changed, or the view of getting protection orders changed from, I can't believe I'm doing this, I'm showing shame, I'm embarrassed, I got to get this notice, you know, to a place where, no, you have this document, you have to do this because this is about your safety.
Well, you're not going to like this answer.
No, I'm serious. I'm sure people out there that's, you know, they got protection orders and they feel bad. I don't want to say they feel bad about it, but I think a lot of it is like shame and guilt, because the situation has gotten that bad to the point where they have to get that kind of stuff, even though it's protecting them, but they still sometimes have, I don't know if they feel embarrassed or shame. But just your answer, you know, you're the expert in that. I'm just doing this from like conversations I had with people over the years who are in these situations.
The answer that I said you're not going to like, nobody's probably going to like this answer, because the answer for me that I have found in the work that I do is you go to the root. And so if you have someone in your life who's creating you such drama that you got to take them to the courthouse, what is it that's within you that's creating that in the first place? What is it about you that is even drawing you that to you? And what is it about you that can't stop it before it gets to that place? Why are you in a situation that's happening? And then when you do something about it, why you feel guilty? You need to go get counseling, because it starts with you. Because sometimes we meet people who we don't know, and they pick up the phone and they start calling us, and that's something we determined somewhere early in the relationship, this is not something I want to do. But what I find for me is I just don't answer the phone, and eventually they stop calling. So it's just, and not engaging. But some people still feel like, oh, I gotta answer the phone, I got to tell him, don't call me no more. That's engaging for some reason. Why are you engaged? So that's energy. Any energy that we put out is going to come back to us. If we're feeling shame about setting boundaries, that means we're not feeling empowered. So
that's something that's what I was looking for, that answer. It's about the not feeling empowered piece. And sometimes, let's be real, some people just have a hard time hearing the word no, because some people you can say, I pick up the phone, this person is still showing up at my job.
You got to call the police.
Yeah.
But
I'm with you.
but it's energy. It's
but there are
energy.
people who are not comfortable or ashamed of doing that. This is really interesting because it goes back to the core piece about what you said about not feeling empowered. It can be a low self-esteem issue. Or
And
maybe
if you saw one of your parents being abused at home and they accepted it, and then you decided to stand up and stop it, but everything in you says, I should be receiving this. This is okay. This is normal. Then you're going to feel bad about stopping something that your parents didn't do. So guess what? You still got to go back and do the work.
Yeah.
Inside of you that is allowing you to feel this way.
So it goes to my favorite, like 2 words you use all the time, inner work. So, that's like, I'm just being honest. Those are my favorite words you use, and I use it all the time. So it goes back to that inner work piece, or Louise Hay had the book, what was it? The mirror work, where people have to really look at themselves first and see how they are, how their actions subconsciously and consciously are contributing to the problem.
So I'm going to share something. I'm going to be vulnerable on your show and tell you this. Probably 30 to 40 years ago, I dated someone who was of degenerative nature. And the person did not have a job. And we were riding in my car, and this person said, I went to McDonald's, and they said they wanted some fries. And I decided I wanted to set a boundary. And I said, no, I'm not buying those fries because the person was unemployed, and I just decided I'd given enough. And when I said no, setting a boundary, they cussed me out. I mean, in the big way. And I was riding along, and I said to myself, why am I accepting this? Why am I letting this person ride in my car and talk to me this way about $1 bag of fries? I pulled over and said, get out. And I have not seen that person since. I set a boundary. And when that person come by my office, I tell myself, don't open the door. That same person, 15 years later, rang my phone at 12:30, 2-3 nights ago. I looked at the phone and did not answer it. So, at some point you set a boundary, and I don't feel guilty about it. Yeah. So, but there was a time when it was like, well, I'm doing this and I didn't want him to be mad. What? Nah.
Yeah.
So it's about
thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Many of my kind of bizarre stories, but once I've learned, thanks to you for your help with the boundary piece, totally different experience in my life. Especially like not accepting, abusive and inappropriate behavior like that.
But setting boundaries can be doing something simple, like you meet a guy and he wants to come over your house and sit down and look at TV with you, but he doesn't want to take you out to dinner. You set a boundary by not letting him come over your house and sit down and look at TV. No. And if he can't ever get to the point where he can take you to dinner, you don't pick up the phone.
Right.
You let the phone ring. But if you are so needy that you need to have someone in your life, therefore they need to come sit down and look at your TV, you're no longer setting a boundary or standards. And you need to look at how you feel about you. That same guy may be the one who smacked you down the road, and you try to figure out, why did I get smacked?
That's why it's important to do that inner work, because once you have that clarity about who you are and what you want out of life, then you can determine what type of partners, significant others, or if you're seeking marriage, what type of spouse you want to have. And if you don't do that particular work that you do through your workshops and counseling, they just repeat that cycle. It just keeps repeating. And then you hear that song about, I keep attracting the same kind of guy that cheats or is abusive. But you have to really look at what how you're doing it, how you're attracting people, subconsciously in your life.
But you know what? We have to be willing to be alone. Because if you're not happy with you, and if you can't be content with you, then you will draw things into your life and accept things that could end up hurting you. And that could be, and many times, because we come from certain environments, we are going to draw to us those things that are symbols of our past, that could be abusive to us, that could hurt us. But when we see it, we have to see it and cut that. We have to set that boundary. We have to shut that thing down. We can't be like, I think I'll change him. If I just be patient, if I just love him enough, he'll change. No, he might whoop your butt. Okay.
Yeah, for real.
Mhm.
Which, speaking of the perspective, we talked about the person being abused. How do you deal with a situation or a client that comes to you who was the abuser? Or do they even come to you?
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
Well, one of the videos that we have on CLR Community Empowered on YouTube and maybe on our website as well, it's a gentleman who was doing drugs, drinking alcohol, dating a woman. She owed him some money. She wouldn't give it to him. He stabbed her. He did 11 years in jail, and now he's out. And he works for me. He's a neighbor. I've known him for years. And now he's got a relationship with God. He's got his own business, and his anger has been dissipated based upon getting some counseling and spending 11 years in jail. But his self-worth has increased because he's got his own business now. He's been validated, and he's been exposed to a church, and he's got God in his life. So that can't change. That can't change.
Yeah.
But that's all, people think
wanted to change. He wanted to change, right?
Yeah, I'm going to say that people have to want to change. Yeah.
Yeah.
We can't change them if they don't want to change.
Exactly. And that's being brave, I think, in itself, to acknowledge that you have a problem. This is not right, what you're doing, and be humble enough to ask for help. And don't let the ego and all that get in the way of seeking that help.
And if you look at the video, and the subtitle on our video is he went to jail for 11 years. He talks about, and he actually cries on the video, some tears come down as he relives his father being abusive to his mother, and how that hurt him to see his father do that to his mother. And then he came up doing that to women. It's good when you meet somebody to find out about the childhood and find out about their lifestyle and where did they, because it's going to replay itself out.
Okay. Yeah. So in regards to your ministry and your work, where do you have a vision of where you would like to see it 5 years from now?
That's a good question. I would love to see the church opening up the door so that we could do workshops everywhere, that all the churches have counseling departments, that all the churches have psychologists, pastors and psychologists working hand in hand. What I noticed, I went to Mary Clyde Bethune University in Florida one year and did a workshop. I noticed that the university students are very open to receiving this too. So we get ready to do a campaign with them. So once COVID is over, that we could go into the universities and do some workshops with college students.
I like to help volunteer or however you need to. That's my thing. Reaching out to
you like that one?
Yeah, I do.
They're young enough that you can catch them before they get set in their ways. And this younger generation, they're coming up with a different level of self-esteem, I believe. I think they're coming up with more sense of who they are and their own identity.
Yeah, I admire that about them. I admire that. But now I'm at the age too where those same young people are coming to me for advice and mentorship. So, which is really cool. I feel like I need to give back, particularly in that space, because I had a lot of guidance during that period of my life as well. So I definitely would like to be more involved in those things. I'm still flirting with the idea about the pastoral ministry work.
I thought you'd already accepted that, Miss Fuller.
I haven't stepped into it yet. It just keeps popping up. I said maybe when I'm older, but I think it's probably gonna be sooner than later, just because of a lot of stuff I'm seeing in the world right now. But I don't know if I could still handle having a Rev title there. People they're like, oh my god, they like when I tried it out the first time, so many people were not comfortable talking to me, and then they kept bringing up all the sex questions, like, do you believe? How do you feel about people having premarital sex? I'm like, I don't know about anybody's sex life personally. It's just like I don't want to put me in that situation where I don't do that judging stuff. I'm like, why are you coming to me about something like random like that? I guess they wanted to feel they could talk to me about it, but I'm like, you're my friend. You know me all these years. I'm not gonna like judge you on certain things. But yeah, people treated me so.
Well, there's another approach. You could not judge them, but still give them advice and counsel.
I give them anyway. I mean, they will still call. They still call me.
You could talk to them about premarital counseling.
Oh, but then, some of those were commitment folks. So I'm like, it's like, don't even. That's a whole nother round there. But yeah, I have to see how that plays out, because I said the interfaith piece has been really, successful for me, as you know, and how will that evolve into, like, will it be chaplain ministry, or how will that look?
Well, and with your permission, I would like to talk just a moment before we close out about how this administration is abusive, and how the folk who are drawn to him are people who have been abused and who are angry. And so I think the church is being called upon, for those of us who are empowered and connected to our higher power. It's our job to keep enlightening, empowering, and educating people so they disconnect from that. If you see that they're operating under it, it's even amazing to me. I have friends and folk with master's degrees, and sometimes they'll say things like, well, the COVID's going to go when it gets warm. What? You believe that? You heard that? I mean, what are you doing? And so I'm finding, if the satanic forces say something enough, those who are vulnerable receive it. So I think we're now at a point where so it's like those who need abuse say, give him 4 more years. This is comfortable for us. This is where I need to be. This feels right to me. Not the fact that it allows me to act out my own dysfunction. It is a level of abuse. It's crazy. So I think we should also be looking around at those around us to see who is reacting to it, who's buying into it, and start doing some healing work, because God is giving us a chance to heal this country. And either we're going to heal or we're going down. One of the two.
The healing work is very critical, which it reminds me again about the book I'm reading. I'm going to read next month, dealing with the whole the aftermath of the transatlantic slave trade and how that still is conditioning with Black people now. But it's also the thing I hear sometimes when some ministers preach about, they talk about abundance a lot, and they'll say there's plenty to go around. Your needs can be met, but if people don't feel like their needs are being met, that might also tie into some of how they also interconnect with a lot of the abusive stuff that's going on, because there's something missing. Like there's a need that's not met. And that can manifest in numerous ways. I mean, it could be even like work. It's like so many people are out of work. And unfortunately, in our society, there's always this blame game of blaming it on other groups of people, when it may just be the structure of our economy, or, other factors that come into play. So I always feel like a lot of that stuff that, like you just mentioned, is always tied into needs not being met.
Right.
Or not feeling validated.
But as this being an interfaith show, and a lot of your audience may be interfaith, there are a lot of evangelicals who have bought into what the administration is selling, and they're trading off what they know to be right for what is wrong. And so it's causing me to look at different ministers who are speaking from the pulpit and saying, look, I don't know if I can listen to you anymore, because, what goes into our hearing goes into our spirit, and we have to be very protective of it. And the Bible says, my sheep shall know my voice. So just like those 40% that are supporting the administration, those are their sheep and they know their voice. Then we've got those of us who are empowered and understand what it means to know God and the difference in righteousness. And I just really think we as a church have a responsibility to not to keep our doors shut. We got to open up these doors and reach out and empower people, help them understand who they are, so they don't.
I agree about keeping those doors open, because that's one of my biggest concerns with faith communities. And it's the whole thing of being insular and homogeneous, and everybody's kind of just like to themselves. And then this is something I was kind of, I won't say struggling with, but just in the work that I'm doing. And I'm thinking, wow, we have all these religions out here and there's still war, there's still poverty. We have this stuff that's going on in our society. And it seems like the work is really still being done by a small collective versus like, how are all these different religious communities are at play to make the world or a world a better place? It's like, I feel like, wow, we're still, all these traditions and we're still struggling with a lot of these issues.
Well, I'm liking some of the churches that I'm seeing that are giving away food and giving away clothing and giving away shoes for the kids, tennis shoes, that they're stepping up in a lot of the things the government is not doing, they're doing. So I think this is the time for us to look at our churches to see what are they giving? How are they making a difference right now? Right now. And have they lost their power because you can't go into the edifice, or have they found other ways to connect to their congregation?
Which I just wrote a quick note. How do you feel about people who are like seekers? Like they want to learn about understanding faith and religion. How can they incorporate their own spiritual practices, or they're just just trying to find their way? So how do you approach that? Like if someone was in your workshop, one of your spiritual workshops, and they're like, I'm just here because I want to learn something. I don't know Bible cover to cover. I don't know scriptures, but I am curious to hear what you have to say. How do you work with people who are either like they consider themselves spiritual but not religious, or don't do any kind of religious practice at all, but they're just seeking of knowledge or just seeking to have a better understanding of like religion and spirituality? Have you come across that in your work?
Well, I merge the two together, and I try to take people where I find them. And for those who are spiritual but not necessarily religious, there are spiritual books they can read that, like the Course in Miracles. You got to be kind of heavy to be ready to reach out for the Course in Miracles. And then there are psychological books that you can read that you can prescribe. Now I like the fact that a lot of shows now you can say, look at that show on TV, look at that show on TV. But at the same time, answer as much, if you can connect the dots for them, everybody's in a different place. And no two people are necessarily in the same place, and they don't have the same experiences. I think we're all seeking, but we're seeking at different levels. And I think some people are still at elementary school level, and some of us at college level, and some of us at PhD level. So you got to figure out what, and don't be throwing them that PhD out there when they're really elementary school.
Right.
That's a gift. Everybody can't do that now. A lot of ministers get. Like when you go to Unity, you better at least be at the college level.
PhD level folks, when I interview them, I said, like if I'm going to write for the newspaper, whatever, I have to bring them down. I say, you got to remember, I'm writing for an audience that has maybe the level of, 8th grade education, reading level. So when you're out like PhD level, I'm like, bring it. And I'm not trying to offend them, but I'm just like, you got to bring it back so they can understand you. Because I'm like, you at a whole nother level of consciousness that's going to be totally, not understood to the people you want to get your message out to. So.
Sometimes I struggle with that. I was the keynote speaker for Roosevelt High School's graduation at Howard University. And I did a speech and it went right over their head. The next day, the principal said the teachers will walk around saying, well, are you A or are you B? Or are you A? I said, well, I guess I made my point, but they never invited me back again. So I figure I blew it. So then I try to study people who now speaking at, they got these big, I'm always trying to heal, but no matter when I speak, but everybody don't want to hear that. So, sometimes you just got to keep it light.
Yeah, you got to keep it light, especially graduations.
Invite it back, okay?
Well, that's cool though. You're getting out there in the high school circuit. That
was long enough ago for me to realize I didn't get invited back. That's funny.
That's cool. So, I know we're wrapping up, and I know you have to save the world doing your legal thing. So any other things you want to share about audience and how they can get in touch with you about your work?
Yes, I invite folks to visit us at www.clrcommunity.org. There are resources there for our workshops, as well as for resources for folk who need to be able to get in touch with folk that can help you with domestic violence. Today, Ms. Fuller is such a delightful host that we didn't get to talk about people getting beat up a lot, but we talked about the basics of what creates that environment in the first place. So if you want to, and also we sent out information about people who need counseling on COVID, because COVID-19 has brought up a lot of domestic violence. And having to stay in the same house and not being able to avoid each other it's hurting them, and not having jobs. They're feeling helpless. So, we offer counseling for that as well. So, you can give us a call, 202-548-0585, or visit our website, and we'll be glad. Oh, sign up for Miss Fuller is probably going to give you all of our social media things. It's at Still Our Community.
In the YouTube channel.
Where you can reach out. But don't be afraid. This is time. God has stopped us in the middle of this thing so that we can sit down and go inside and reflect and see who are we going to come out being. So you want to come out better than you were going in.
Exactly. That's what it is. Exactly. So thank you so much, Ms. Outlaw, for coming on the program. We appreciate you being here with us. Thank you so much, and sharing your words of wisdom and experience, and so much education where people can be informed and empowered. So I am very honored to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Ms. Fuller. Maybe we can get some time.
All right.
And much success to you. By the way, I'm very proud of you. So continue doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And for our audience, for more information, just go to interfaithconnections.com and subscribe on YouTube. Thank you so much. Take care. Goodbye.